In yet another Atomic Lizard's double feature, Godzilla takes on new monsters Gigan and Megalon, but this time, he has some help as he brings in Anguirus and Jet Jaguar along for the fight. It's Godzilla vs. Gigan and Godzilla vs. Megalon, here on the Atomic Lizards podcast.
Welcome to Atomic Lizards. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I'm Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
And I'm Dan, the Kaiju extraordinaire.
Today's episode of Kaiju Korner, we are covering Godzilla vs. Gigan from 1972 and Godzilla vs. Megalon from 1973. We have yet another double feature for you, so first up is Godzilla vs. Gigan.
Manga artist Gengo Udaka lands a job with the World Children's Land Amusement Park only to become suspicious of the organization when a garbled message is discovered on tapes. As Gengo and a group of concerned individuals investigate the company, Godzilla and Anguirus quickly decipher the message and leave Monster Island.
Godzilla vs. Gigan is a 1972 Japanese kaiju film directed by Jun Fukuda, written by Shinichi Sekizawa, and produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, with special effects by Teruyoshi Nakano. It is the 12th film in the Godzilla franchise and features Godzilla, Gigan, Anguirus, and King Ghidorah. The film stars Hiroshi Ishikawa, Yoriko Hishimi, Tomoko Umeda, and Minoru Takashima, alongside Haru Nakajima as Godzilla, Kenpachiro Satsuma as Gigan, Koetsu Omaya as Anguirus, and Kanta Ina as King Ghidorah.
Episode will have spoilers, so go watch it if you haven't yet. Now let's get started. Dan, what are your initial thoughts on this movie?
All right, so Godzilla vs. Gigan. This is definitely where I feel like the Showa era movies just get straight up silly, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, camp can be fun, but I just don't feel like the camp was enough to elevate this movie very much in my eyes. I mean, to be honest, I really just don't have too much to say here. I mean, it's another standard Showa era Godzilla movie. The new addition of Gigan is fun. I like Gigan, but I also feel like this is when Toho started to kind of lessen the budgets with these films, mainly with the monster suits. The suits in this movie definitely feel a little worn out and like overused. I mean, which makes sense. Like this is the 12th movie in the franchise, and like they've been doing this since 1954, and this is like what 70s or late 60s. So like 72, yeah. So like they've been doing this for a while now. So I mean, it makes sense, but still, like it's, you know, the fact that I can tell that these suits are like all worn out and that the budget maybe isn't as big, it like kind of takes me out of it just a little bit. But although it was interesting to see how they opted to show like a bit of gore in the fight scenes with the addition of blood, like I was not expecting that. In fact, I remember the first time I saw this movie, I rented it at a video store back when those were still a thing, and I was with my aunt. And like I was watching the movie and she was just in the room with me, and like all the fight scenes were happening with all the like blood and whatever. And I just remember her reaction. She was like, geez, like what are you watching or whatever? Cause I was like, what, like 9, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. So, but yeah, that's besides the point. I mean, back to the movie though, like, I didn't really feel like the human characters left too much of an impression on me. Although the antagonists, I loved the antagonists. They were good in a super cheesy, like late 60s, early 70s sci-fi kind of way. But all in all, I didn't really think too much of this one. It's not awful, but it's definitely not good either. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. What about you, Udi? What did you think of this movie?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat as you. There were like things that I liked, like having Anguirus come back was kind of fun. Having like Gigan, I think Gigan looks freaking awesome. He looks so cool. I'm not gonna get into like all the design stuff or anything, but like just throwing that out there right away, like that was like a huge plus for me, just because like I just think he looks so freaking cool, and I've seen him around like since we started doing this and everything. I've seen him in stuff, and I'm like, I want to see that guy. I want to meet that guy in one of these. He looks pretty cool. So like he was cool, and then like Ghidorah coming back, I was like, okay, I didn't know that. That was pretty cool. But I mean, yeah, I basically agree with everything you said. Where it definitely just started to feel kind of like just another Showa movie. Not bad, just not great. Didn't really outside of a couple aspects that well, I'll just say like I really liked a lot of like some of the destruction sequences. So I'll just say that, but like, some of the shots are like really cool, and then again like Gigan and Ghidorah and everything, like that was really cool. I mean, as always, like the kaiju stuff is like the coolest part, and kind of what you watch for. But yeah, I mean, the human characters aren't really anything special. The antagonists were not what I was expecting. But it was interesting. I don't know if I've said this before. I don't really look anything up about these. Kind of like my general approach to all movies. I don't try to look up too many things about the movies I'm going to watch. So like I'm like, oh, what movies are we watching? We're watching these, all right. And then I watch them, and then all of a sudden I'm just discovering everything that's happening as I'm watching. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, what? Oh, okay, all right. And so like this reminded me a lot of gosh, what was the movie we just watched? Was it Godzilla versus Hedorah? Like the one with like the smog monster?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Godzilla versus Hedorah is the smog monster, the one we just watched, yes.
Okay, thank you. This one kind of reminded me of like that, but just like, so when, not to get too much into that, but like when it kind of gets into like similar messaging, I was like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like another one. Oh, wow, that's kind of like two almost like in a row. I didn't expect that, and then it kind of goes in the different direction. It was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I definitely liked Hedorah more overall as like a movie, but this still I feel like had some really fun and some fun moments and some cool moments. But yeah, overall not super memorable, but yeah, not bad. So yeah, what about you, Miranda?
Yeah, so this one, Godzilla vs. Gigan, as I usually do, I'm gonna give you my initial thoughts that I put on Letterbox. It says, yes, cockroach aliens, because why not? With a LOL at the end. Because why not cockroach aliens? I was not expecting it. I thought it was cool, but bizarre. I think this one is a very bizarre movie, although not as bizarre as Megalon, but we'll get into that when we get there. But in general, I liked the Monster Island, I guess it's the Children's Island, the theme park, that concept, and I found the human characters to be very interesting. It gave off Scooby-Doo vibes, which I was like, didn't realize that until this exact moment when rewatching it. Of course, you get speech bubbles of creatures talking to each other like that. There's some shots that are questionable, and the logic of how plot armor, I guess I should say, plot armor is a big thing in this movie.
So, in the Japanese version of this movie, you get the speech bubbles, but if you watch the English dub like I did, they actually talk, and it's not good. I just wanted to add that in.
Oh, I did not know that.
They pronounce
no.
they pronounce Anguirus's name like I'll like literally it's like hey Anguilla or whatever, and it's like that's not how you pronounce Anguirus. It's Anguirus, not Anguilla. What is that?
That's a choice.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they did not have them speak in this one. I like the speech bubbles. I mean, I know whatever his name is, Manila, he talked in All Monsters Attack, but that was in a kid's brain, so that's passable. But to have them actually talk in a real universe movie is kind of strange. But it's not the first time that they've had kaijus talk to each other, though. I think they talk with Mothra and Godzilla talk in one of the ones we've watched. But that's an interesting fact that I did not know. Yeah, so I guess in general, it's a funky movie. Give it a watch if you got an hour and a half. You know, watch it in English or in Japanese. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. But I guess let's talk a bit about the message of this movie. So a bit of the message in this movie is about pollution and what it will do to the planet. That's why the cockroach aliens show up and are like trying to take over Earth or whatever. It also has some early 70s sci-fi elements. And as a viewer of the film, how do you feel about the way the story was conveyed? So like, what about the characters? The cockroach aliens, was that the right choice? Like, the general plot, and then like, does it fit with other sci-fi of the time? Like, Star Trek had started a few years before, Doctor Who was on television at the time. Obviously, it's not current versions of those characters. They're the characters from back to the day, but it has that like same type of feel.
So that's an interesting question. Like, I can't really compare this to, like, say, Doctor Who, for example, because I haven't really watched Doctor Who. I've never even seen, like, the original show from this time period from the 60s. And I have seen some Star Trek. I would say this feels different from Star Trek because, in my personal opinion, like this movie especially, like, don't get me wrong, I love the cockroach aliens. The cockroach aliens are awesome. It's like I said, it's just that special, like, this cheesy sci-fi villain aliens that, I can't get enough of. I do really like the cockroach aliens, but I feel like with something like Star Trek, it takes its stories like more seriously and with more logic behind like the different alien races and whatnot that exist in that world. Now, I'm not saying that Star Trek can't be silly because it can. I mean, have you seen that clip of William Shatner fighting those like lizard aliens? Like, so Star Trek can be silly, but I just feel like in terms of like its writing and how it conveys the characters in that world and the different races of aliens and whatnot, I feel like there's more thought put into it versus this movie where it's like, oh, it's cockroach aliens. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't any thought put into it because I'm sure there was. I mean, it's explained in the movie that the whole reason why the cockroach aliens came to Earth was because it had to do with the pollution, and well, they're cockroaches, so they can survive anything, so I don't really have much to say in terms of like the characters and whatnot. And in terms of the environmental message, I felt like that was much better put in Godzilla vs. Hedorah than it was in this movie.
Yeah, it was definitely put better in Godzilla vs. Hedorah, but it's like still there. So that's why I wanted to mention it, because it is still relevant. And by thinking of that made me transition to like Doctor Who and Star Trek. So like I do get like what you're saying is like there's maybe not as much thought in this Godzilla movie that compared to like original episodes of the original Star Trek, but they still do, all three of them comment on social norms or society at the moment. So that's where I was kind of like going for that question. And like, I mean, they dressed up a dog as an lion on Star Trek, so it can get really silly. But I just wanted to see if you guys were familiar with like that sci-fi end of sci-fi, the more camp and less scientific in terms of Doctor Who, which now I'm realizing may not have been the best question since you guys don't really know about Doctor Who that much. But what are your thoughts, Udi, on the sci-fi elements? Like, do you feel similar to Dan, or a whole different thing?
I mean, yeah, I would say for the most part, pretty similar to Dan. I also, unfortunately, the most Star Trek exposure, I guess you could say, that I have is from the look down upon J.J. Abrams movies. So, I mean, I've seen like little tiny like short clips of the original show and everything, but like I've seen at least a screen grab, if not maybe a short clip of like of William Shatner fighting the lizard people. So like I know it could get kind of silly, but and then like as far as Doctor Who, like I don't really know a ton of like original Doctor Who or like really really old Doctor Who. And the most Doctor Who knowledge that I have outside of just like general kind of like from having like you and then one of my other friends who got like kind of into Doctor Who for a time, outside of like just passive knowledge I picked up from you guys, the most knowledge I picked up on is from like the parody Doctor Who show from Community. So
I mean, that's a pretty good parody of Doctor Who.
yeah, it does seem pretty spot on.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called though.
Inspector Spacetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your question, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty much like kind of like my point of view is kind of like what Dan was saying, where like it kind of fits, but like it's still kind of different, and it's like silly, but like most sci-fi at this time was still kind of silly. Although again, like Star Trek was more, I would say, revered and looked upon as more seriously, as far as I know. And then like in the late 60s, I believe, like we got like 2001, so like it was still taken seriously at times or whatever. It's just, I mean, yeah, a lot of it did tend to kind of be a little campy or silly or whatever.
There's a lot of sci-fi going on. I think that's mostly because of the moon landing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like the space race and everything too.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense as well. With the, like you guys were saying, with the historical significance of the moon landing, I could see that being a case for the inspiration behind all the sci-fi stuff going on around this time. But one thing I forgot to add is that so the cockroach aliens, they really reminded me more of like 50s sci-fi, like back in the day with those cheesy B movies, like during the atomic age and whatnot. I definitely got more of a sense of like that type of sci-fi with those cockroach aliens.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I agree with that. Again, but yeah, that makes sense. Like the old, like kind of 50s, because I feel like in the 50s, a lot of like more sci-fi type movies and whatever had just kind of creatures, which like a lot of times was like a giant spider or something. Whereas like in the 60s, it kind of turned more like aliens and I feel like, yeah, more kind of aliens. Plus, like, wasn't the Roswell incident in like the 60s as well?
It was.
Yeah. I feel like that it kind of started changing more towards like just aliens and just like weird stuff like that. Plus, like the 60s and 70s were, especially the 70s, were just kind of like a time of weirdness. I mean, a time for a lot of other things, but like there's a lot of like weird stuff in media going on. So
Yeah, it's kind of given Blob vibes. That's from either the 50s or the early 60s or something.
yeah.
Yeah. Great movie, actually. Unexpected goodness, I guess. But yeah, I guess maybe it could be more in line of that type of sci-fi. And you're right, the 70s is a weird time too. But, in a few years, you get Star Wars. So it's really all over the place for sci-fi. And I'm not sure at what point you would consider kaiju movies or sci-fi movies. Like, I feel like they're very much both. It's very strange because when I was watching, I was thinking about Star Trek and Doctor Who. I watched a bit of old Who, and it was really silly and ridiculous. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is definitely something that I would like. And like classic Star Trek too. Also a show that I've sat down and watched several times. But I guess also a more modern take sci-fi thing is Men in Black, especially the cockroach aliens. I don't know if you guys picked up on that vibe, where it's like they're literally wearing a human suit. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I wonder if those creators of the comics and the movie and stuff like watched this movie, and I was like, yeah, we like that. And then again with all the other stuff, aliens and going to space and stuff layered on top of that, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that was definitely. I mean, yeah. I guess I don't really know a lot about the history of Men in Black. I just know about like the movies, and I've watched the movies, and I've played like one of the video games. But outside of that, I don't really know a lot about like the history of the franchise or anything. But yeah, when they reveal that it's like the cockroach aliens and like you see their shadows, and I'm like, this is giving me pretty strong Men in Black vibes. And I mean, for better or worse, like I would say the first three Men in Black movies are pretty decent, pretty entertaining. So
I would agree with that.
yeah, but yeah, it was yeah. Again, it's just not what I was expecting, but it was fun. You know, it's fun.
I didn't even really think about the whole like Men in Black comparison there. That's true. There is like cockroach aliens in that movie. I didn't even think about that. That's funny. I wonder, because like you guys are saying, we don't really know what the history behind those movies are, but I do wonder.
I mean, there's probably like giant alien creatures in that. Maybe we could cover it one day. But yeah, so I guess we've kind of answered the sci-fi question, but like, how do you guys feel about the way the story was conveyed? Like, do you like Jun Fukuda's style? Do you prefer Honda's? Like, did you find anything of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough question to answer because once again, I just really didn't really feel like the human characters left that much of an impression on me. But one moment, and this is kind of random, but one moment I did like was when they find, I don't remember the name of the main character. I never remember the names of any of these characters in these Godzilla movies, even though I've seen them a million times. But I like when they like corner the main character and then he faints because he thinks that he has a gun pointing at him, but really it was just corn on the cob. I don't know.
That part was ridiculous.
Yeah. You know what? I like that guy. Like I like I like the way he looks with the glasses and like long hair and everything. I don't know. He looks like
Yeah.
he looks like he'd be fun to hang out with. So but yeah, in terms of the way the story was conveyed, I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting that the character we follow like isn't a scientist or like a news reporter or like someone in the military or whatever. He's a guy just making comics. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Nicely, it's a different little change of pace for like main human characters as far as Godzilla movies go. So
It is definitely a change of pace. I wasn't expecting him to be a manga artist. And he doesn't really use those. I mean, I guess he does use his art skills later when they like make a portrait of themselves and then tape it to the elevator, which was weird. But like his girlfriend, I think maybe is a black belt in karate. So they just have her like beat up people, the bad guys, throughout the film, which I found interesting, which I was not expecting.
I got a real kick out of that one scene where like the bad guys like have them all like I think they're taking them hostage or whatever. Yeah. Like the bad guys are taking them hostage. Then the girlfriend walks in and then immediately just starts kicking butt. Like I got a real kick out of that.
It's definitely it's just kind of like a silly callback because it's like they just happen to bring it up at the beginning, like, oh, you happen to have a black belt, ha ha ha. And I was like, okay. And then of course, it was basically like a Chekhov's gun of, oh no, they're cornered. What's gonna happen? Then she walked in, I was like, oh my god, no. And then she just started kicking the crap out of him. I was like, oh my god, yes, get him. It's just like a silly little callback, but like they set it up. It didn't come out of nowhere. It was just kind of funny that immediately, like you said, she walked in the door. She was like, "Oh hell no!" And then she started just kicking them, punching them, beating them up.
Yeah, it's a nice setup with a nice payoff, which doesn't always happen in these movies.
True.
So it's nice to see that. Also, not a reporter. So, and not mind controlled by aliens. So, she's a unique woman character in this franchise.
True. Did she ever interact with the other girl who was with like the hippie looking guy?
I think at the end when they're all like as a group, like they're all together. I have no idea. I don't remember they talked or had a conversation or
Okay.
interacted
Yeah.
through the script.
Yeah. I was just trying to remember. I was like, did this movie pass the Bechdel test? But I don't remember.
Well, no one really talks about relationships at all, really, in this movie. I don't think.
I'm just gonna say I wouldn't count on a Godzilla movie from the '70s passing the Bechdel test, but then again, what do I know? So.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really like expecting it, but I was like, I just happened to think, I was like, wait, did it pass? Because I was like, oh, maybe it's a possibility, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't gonna like bank on it.
You know which Godzilla movie does pass the Bechdel test, though, is Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 one.
Well, I hope it didn't take that long for one of them to pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
We could do some calculations at a later date. Or
Yeah,
someone probably on Reddit already has done that for us.
probably. But I guess to answer your question about like how I felt about the story being portrayed, I mean, kind of like how I was saying, and that's why I didn't really want to get too into it when I was like giving my initial thoughts. This movie is kind of like a little all over the place. So like I really liked Godzilla versus Hedorah because it felt very like, again, kind of like I said in our previous episode, where it felt kind of like the closest out of like the Showa era, or like ever since the beginning, it felt like the closest to that in terms of like its vision, where it had like a very particular message it wanted to get across, and it took it fairly seriously outside of like whatever kind of silly hijinks maybe, or whatever silly kaiju stuff happens. But like for the most part, like there's very striking imagery, some of which was like pretty dark, stuff like that. So I, not because it was dark, but like I just appreciate how seriously it took the topic of its messaging and its themes and what it wanted to talk about. And so when this one kind of was positioning itself at least slightly to be kind of like, again, like an anti-pollution, or just like an environmentalist film, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, all right, well, interesting. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm curious to see what they'll do. And then it kind of just devolved into like just a regular Showa era Godzilla movie, which again, like, not a problem. And it is still fun. And like I was saying in my initial thoughts, like I really liked the destruction sequences at the end, like when Gigan and Ghidorah were just destroying all the city, and like there were so many shots where there's just like flames all around. I was like, God, this looks so freaking cool. But overall, though, I do kind of feel like it kind of lost its well, not necessarily like lost its footing, but it kind of went all over the place, like especially like tone. Well, not really tonally. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I appreciated that it tried to kind of say something, and it kind of did, but it didn't really like stick to it. It kind of just like presented it. It was like, all right, well, I said my piece, and then it was like, all right, kaiju movie action fight. Which again isn't bad, and I mean I don't expect these movies to be more meaningful necessarily than like they are. It's a nice surprise when it happens, but it's not something I expect. So it didn't ruin it for me, but it definitely, like, I feel like this movie could have been elevated by sticking more in that regard to like the story instead of just like going straight to the kaiju stuff and the silliness again. But I mean it's just not what it was. Again, I mean when the antagonists are well, they're not evil, but like they were cockroach aliens trying to prevent the destruction of Earth. It's just it is what it is.
Wanted to mention, because you were talking about the destruction scenes. For some reason, even when I saw this as a kid, there's always one shot during those destruction scenes that always sticks out to me. And it's this random shot where like Gigan walks past like a store and there's like dolls or whatever in the store. I don't know. For some reason, that shot just always stuck out to me. And as a kid, I thought it was kind of funny because like, oh, it's funny. He just like walks past like a toy store or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that shot was weird because I couldn't tell if they were supposed to be like a miniature. Like the dolls were normal size, but everything else in that scene was small. And it's like, are these supposed to be giant dolls in a toy store? That part really kind of is confusing if you're not like, if you just like look up from your phone when watching, which odd.
Miranda, were you not watching the movie?
I was. It's just, the fight scenes are really long and I almost fell asleep a few times. Not on purpose. Just like, I know a bunch of people watch kaiju movies for the kaiju fighting, but like, if we could dial it back just a smidge in these old ones, I would appreciate it. But controversial opinion there, so.
Yeah, that's like it's understandable about like getting a little sleepy or not being 100% present necessarily, but not in every moment. Like obviously you watch all of it and everything, and you pay attention and everything. I was just kind of poking fun.
Yeah,
but
I did fully watch it all the way through the first time I watched it without my phone, so it was a rewatch. If that adds anything to it.
yeah, and like I said, it's fine. but yeah, I can understand it being kind of like a hot take about the kaiju stuff.
I also just want to say, don't feel bad about almost falling asleep, because you know how many times I've rewatched Godzilla movies and I've struggled to stay awake, so don't feel bad. And I've seen all of them multiple times, so it's okay.
Yeah, I think I was slightly fighting for my life at a couple of points too, so it makes you feel any better.
Yeah, a little bit. That's nice to know not that I wasn't the only one kind of struggling to get through this movie. Even though it is short, it's under 90 minutes, I think. If I'm remembering correctly. But,
yeah, I think it's like 129 or something, so just literally, just barely.
Barely. 60 seconds off. But even because of my viewing experience, I actually do like the way the story was conveyed in this one. I felt like it was fun and funky, and it reminded me of the other Jun Fukuda movies, like the ones where they're on the island. I'm pretty sure he did those ones. It's like, we got this like fun, ridiculous vibe back, because like in like Hedora, it was more serious but weird, and this one's just like, yeah, we're just having fun here. We're just going to do everything in a ridiculous manner, including the weird wide fishbowl lens shots. I don't know if you guys noticed those during like the car chase. I was like, this is a choice. Why are we doing this?
I feel like I vaguely remember that, but yeah, I don't remember it like sticking out too much to me, but I feel like I do vaguely remember thinking it was an interesting choice in the moment.
Yeah. And like, this movie is all over the place, like mentioned. It's just, it's very strange. And it did definitely give me Scooby-Doo vibes, which I did mention earlier, which also came out around this time, although I have no idea if Hanna-Barbera was in Japan at the time, but I don't know. It's a strange movie.
Funny you mention Hanna-Barbera, because they made like the very first Godzilla cartoon. The very first Godzilla cartoon was made by Hanna-Barbera, so I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Yeah, funny that you mentioned them.
I'm guessing that's probably difficult to watch.
Nah, the official Godzilla YouTube channel has some episodes uploaded. Granted, they're in like 2 parts, but you can watch them on YouTube.
Interesting. Might have to check that out.
I will say it's not great. Like, it's not a great show, and it's very funny because the 1998 Godzilla animated series that came out to coincide with the movie actually took that concept from the Hanna-Barbera show and like kind of remade it. So that show's way better, by the way. I love the 1998 Godzilla cartoon. I don't mean to get too off topic, but that show's awesome. So, but yeah, I know. I just think it's kind of funny that it's kind of a remake of the Hanna-Barbera show.
Going back to what you were saying, Miranda, about it feeling like Scooby-Doo-y, yeah, it was definitely kind of that vibe, but it is kind of interesting because it's like, well, is it just because of the time period, or is it just because of the antics that are going on, or like it is kind of one of those things that's kind of hard to fully be like, is it this or is it that? But definitely, I did get like a little bit of an old school Scooby-Doo vibe, especially because they were like kind of investigating, and it was like a young group of like college-aged kids, roughly, something investigating this big company and everything, and like in a way, at least like one of them, the manga artist, was like hired by them. So I don't know, like some Scooby-Doo stories where like they're hired, and then it ends up being the person who hired them that is like the spooky ghost or whatever.
And yeah, I guess thinking about it, is it just because of the time period and the fact that there's like a hippie character and like a artsy character and like a karate character? Because I think in Daphne in the 2000 remakes, she knows like all those fighting skills. I was like, maybe my brain's just pulling stuff I know and just connecting the dots here. Again, hence the Star Trek and the Doctor Who, Scooby-Doo, Men in Black and stuff. So maybe this movie is like the beginning of all those, like, I guess maybe tropes that we see throughout media in general. I think I've mentioned this concept several times before, I think, where it's like, okay, we're watching it in the past, and how is that past affecting what we're seeing now? And what's like, is it a reflection of society then, or is it reflection now, and how are they connected, and all of that jazz, which I could go into more depth with a research paper on, but I am rusty on those skills, and we do not have time for that. So we've basically covered everything, I think, with the previous question, so I think it's time to move on to the next. Godzilla versus Gigan is the last time Godzilla was portrayed by Haruo Nakajima, starting it all with Godzilla 1954. So how do you feel about Godzilla in this movie? Like how he behaves through this movie, meaning like the acting of Godzilla or Godzilla as a being / character? Like, did anything catch your attention? And did you know that fact before right now?
So I actually did not know that this was the last time Haruo Nakajima performed as Godzilla. So that's interesting to learn. But in terms of Godzilla himself and like the way he's portrayed, the way Nakajima does the performance, I mean, I didn't feel like it was anything too different from previous Showa era movies, although once again, I've mentioned this before, I was taken off guard by the blood. It was kind of interesting to like see Godzilla bleed, so like, because like we see him get thrown around a lot, get tossed in the air and like headbutted and tackled, but we've never seen him bleed before. So that was interesting. And it did catch me off guard, even though it's like the way it's done is kind of over the top because it's literally like spraying out of his body like a hose or whatever. So that's kind of ridiculous, but that's besides the point.
If you can make God bleed, the people will cease to believe in him. It's a little
I
Iron Man
understood that
2
reference. Yeah.
Little Iron Man 2 reference.
I should have understood that reference, but did not because I don't like Iron Man 2. But
that's fair.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah. But yeah, I was also thrown off by the blood. Not because like I think it was just more shocking. One, because one, it was very vibrant, and two, it was kind of a lot. Just like in the like amount that kind of shot out. There wasn't like a lot on screen or like it didn't linger on the blood, but just like the amount that kind of came out in the moment. I was like, whoa! Plus, again, like as you were saying, I think it was the first time that it's happened, so it was just like, what the hell? Because it kind of just comes out of nowhere. So it did kind of take me out of it, but I mean, compared to anything else that like has blood generally, like it's really not that bad. It just I feel like it just kind of takes you out of it because we're not used to seeing it in the context of like a Godzilla movie or well, kaiju movies, I guess, because like there have been some. Well, yeah, there's definitely been kaiju movies with kaiju blood, which is usually different, like colored differently or whatever. But yeah, was not expecting to see Godzilla get cut up.
It was definitely a shock, and it looks like tempera paint. So, at least
It
it's
does,
not,
yeah.
yeah. So it looks like red blood, although it does not have the consistency of red blood. If you want that, you have to do in black and white movie. You can use chocolate syrup, like Alfred Hitchcock did. But I was also not expecting Godzilla to bleed in this movie. I was like, whoa, okay, I didn't know we were going here, but sure. And they picked red. And again, I don't know if this was a trope of the time just to have blood be blood, or if they do it nowadays, they make blood like gold, like in the newest Thor movie, or make it blue and like Edgar Wright's End of the World.
The World's End.
The World's End, thank you. They make it blue so they can get away with like raiding things. Or maybe they weren't thinking about that at all. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like it was so early, and I mean, in general, I mean, this is before. Pretty positive is before like the PG-13 rating even existed. So,
Oh, definitely, it was
yeah.
not a thing, and technically, that's for American films, not like other countries too.
Yeah, and so like, there's definitely like a lot of older movies. And I feel like we've talked about this before on the podcast. So I'm not gonna like linger on this for long, but yeah, there's a lot of like older movies, like specifically, and I think this is the one that changed it, if not maybe the sequel. But like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I remember when I watched that for the first time, and I was in like college. Like I knew they were like fun adventure movies, but I didn't expect them to be so like gory and like visceral. And so when like some of the images popped up on screen, I was like, oh my god, like that's pretty crazy for a kids movie. It's like, again, like this really isn't that bad, but yeah, again, just because we're not used to it, it feels like it's more excessive than it is. I mean, it is excessive, just not that crazy.
Yeah, and like movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jaws, I think are the reason why the PG-13 rating system exists. So it's funny that you brought those up.
I think Gremlins is on that list too, for causing the PG-13 rating.
I would not be surprised.
I would not have guessed that. Guess those gremlins do be gremlin.
Just don't feed them after midnight.
True. Don't shake your letterbox app after midnight either.
You know, it's always after midnight, so I don't really understand that rule.
Yeah, you know, you're not wrong, I guess. When would after midnight be? Because yeah, 1 a.m. is after midnight, but technically so is now, 8:50.
Poking plot holes into Gremlins, the movie we're not covering at the moment.
But anyway, to bring it all back to what we were talking about, well, yeah, I'm in the same boat as Dan. I didn't know that Haru Nakajima, like this was his last time portraying Godzilla, and I didn't realize it was the same guy in the suit. Like it makes sense, I just didn't realize it. So that's pretty cool. I guess it's been like a while, almost like more than 10 years, like 15 years. So I guess it makes sense, or a little less maybe. But still, that's pretty cool. And as far as like the way he behaves, I mean, I think we talked about this early on, like at least like some of the suits that are not like mainly the Godzilla suit, I would say. Like there are some parts where like some of the suits look a little funky, a little wonky. But like, especially with the Godzilla suit, like it does look pretty goofy. I think just like the last few movies for a time now in the show era, like he has just kind of looked a little goofy. Um, he didn't look terrible. Like he's definitely looked worse than other ones, but yeah. So I feel like that maybe makes judging his performance a little harder, just because like the suit itself is kind of more goofy. But I thought he did a good job. I mean, it wasn't anything I feel like that stood out too much to me. But I mean, it felt like Godzilla, so at least to me. So yeah, I wouldn't say anything stuck out in a good or bad way in any way outside, like in terms of the performance and everything. So yeah, what about you, Miranda?
I think it was a good performance for his last time performing as Godzilla. So one thing I did notice is that if you compare this to the original, you can tell that, well, obviously the suits change because they're remaking them. So Godzilla himself looks visually different. But also you could tell, like, it's getting lighter, too. So in, like, the first movies, he's, like, stumbling around, literally tripping over himself, and so are the other creatures. Whereas this one, they have a lot more movement. He has a lot more movement, and, like, Nakajima also like created like a style of how Godzilla like walked and stuff. If you're like paying attention to that, there is a lot. So I can't really specifically say anything specific, but Godzilla definitely became a certain type of character with certain movements and fighting styles, which has translated into most of the movies going forward, which is pretty cool. And I mean, it's gotta be pretty cool to be like, yeah, I was Godzilla, so I liked it.
Would it be really cool to say that you played Godzilla though? Because from what I heard, now this was just the '54 film, but being in that suit was awful. So,
Sure, it sucked in the moment, but like, if I got a chance to play Godzilla, I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. Sure, even if it was for like an hour. Like, it'd still be pretty cool. I mean, it wouldn't be cool as in cold, it would be hot. But you know what I mean, right?
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. But no, I mean, you're not wrong though. Like, even if I was given the chance to play Godzilla, like you said, maybe if it was for like an hour, I'd want to do it. But if it was like for the entire movie, like all day, I don't think I'd want to do it because yeah, I have heard that being in the suit sucked.
Maybe the key is to record in like a giant freezer room or something. That way you can't get super hot.
There you go. The rest of the crew, on the other hand, well, they're out of luck.
Well, just make sure they wear winter coats and hats and gloves and hand warmers. They'll be fine.
We talked a lot about Godzilla and his character and the acting and stuff, but we have a new monster. We have a giant saw chicken, also known as Gigan. He looks like a chicken with swords for hands. And I think he is an interesting addition to the kaiju lineup in this franchise. Definitely unique. So do you guys think he was a good addition to this lineup of kaiju?
Oh yeah, I love Gigan. I think he's a really cool design, and yeah, he does kind of look like a chicken. It's kind of funny, but no, man, he's
green
great.
chicken.
Yes, but no, man. Oh, go ahead.
He reminds me of one of those chickens you squeeze and they scream for some reason. Like,
you mean like the rubber chicken?
yeah.
Oh,
I think it's just like the proportions of him, but
that's really funny.
yeah.
But yeah, I love Gigan. I love his design. I love like the chainsaw on his stomach and like the like claw arms or whatever. That's so metal. Like no, Gigan's great. Yeah, one of the things that I really love about Toho monsters is, like you said, Miranda, they're just such unique designs. Like, these designs don't feel generic or like overplayed at all to me. All of them are just so interesting and unique. It's like, man, what are they gonna think of next? I would love to see I would love for Toho to like create just another like completely original monster to add into the Godzilla universe, because they're just they just always come up with some of the most interesting and like crazy designs I've ever seen for monsters. It's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, to agree with you, and as I was kind of saying at the beginning in my initial thoughts, I freaking loved Gigan. I thought he was just like visually, he's just a very, very cool looking character. Just a lot of stuff going on. I didn't know that he had like a saw blade in his chest. I thought it was just like spikes. So when that thing started going, I was like, oh my god, he has a freaking saw chest. That's freaking awesome. And I mean, I wasn't sure I was gonna use it, but it was very effective in combat. And I mean, it got us our first glance at kaiju gore with Godzilla, so that was interesting. But yeah, just his spiky hands. I like the visor. I mean, I guess he kind of does look a little bit like a chicken, but I don't know. I don't mind. Like, I think he just looks so cool, so neat. And yeah, I mean, Toho has had some in like these in the show era and everything. Like, I would say for the most part, they've done a really good job, like a really great job with these different kaijus and making them look interesting and everything. There's been some versions that haven't looked as good, but like, man, when they hit it out of the park with like with Gigan, like, whew, they really nail it, because it's just such an iconic look. I feel like it's so visually interesting. There's so many like different textures going on, like with scales and like different colors. Just a very, very cool design. And I mean, I would say that he was definitely a very worthy opponent. And then like him and Ghidorah were kicking butt for a little bit there. So definitely. And then I mean, again, like we got all like the shots with them like destroying the cities and stuff. So very, very cool sequences with them too, which just made selling him as like a cool kaiju even easier, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely have a very unique character, and like he is designed very well. Like you were saying, the textures and the color. He's like green, right?
Yeah, he's green.
Yeah. So tried to think if there was any other green kaiju offhand, but I can't remember.
You're asking the wrong person.
Godzilla,
Although,
kind of.
Yeah, I was gonna say in some
kind
cases
of.
Godzilla. Yeah, so
I mean,
is Anguirus green?
not officially.
He's brown.
No,
He's brown.
He's
Yeah.
like grayish, brownish.
Ghidorah's like golden. Mothra's
Yes.
not green.
No.
Ebra's red.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Smog
know.
Monster is
shiny. Yeah, like grayish.
And Megalon is not
Megalon.
green. And
I'm
Mecha G
surprised.
isn't.
I'm surprised Megalon's not green.
Yeah. So that's definitely a unique feature for him. I also wasn't sure how like his like saw and his chest was going to work, but I was listening to a different podcast and they were covering this movie, and I guess they were saying that like he's like a mech kind of, and that's why he has like the swords for hands and the saw, which I don't know if they get into the movie in the movie about that.
I don't think they do, but they're right. Gigan is supposed to be a cyborg, I'm pretty sure. Like part organic
okay.
and then part robotic. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to make of what he was, because like he just kind of appears and then I mean, not to spoil the next movie, but he comes back like no problem. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he just appears through like a reverse explosion.
It's like, yes, I love teleportation where it involves just a random explosion bringing me into the location I need to be.
They definitely was like, let's do multiple explosions to like bring him back. Right? It's this movie where it's like a diamond shape and it like explodes and then backwards explodes and then like right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
And doesn't make any sense, but hey, we'll go with it.
Yeah. I mean, they gotta do something cool. He's a new kaiju.
They also kind of refreshed Anguirus' look, right? Like he looked a bit more refined, I would say, in this one compared to like the last time we saw him, I believe.
Yeah, I think the last time we saw him was in Destroy All Monsters, and I can't really remember exactly how his suit looked in that movie versus this movie, but I think they did refine him a little. I will admit Anguirus with those angry eyes did look a little cute at times, especially when they're shining the light on him after he comes out of the water. I love those angry eyes, man. They always get me.
He's just such an angry little guy.
I know, right? Give him a big old hug, except you'd get stabbed due to all his spikes.
He'd be as lovable as a hedgehog. Be like, oh, what's up? It'll go, oh God, ow.
Exactly.
I mean, people love Sonic, so.
I'm one of them.
But speaking of Anguirus, how did he survive the fall from biting onto King Hedorah's neck and like falling several stories? Like, how is he not dead?
He's resilient.
Yeah, I guess so. But I guess a lot of the characters actually have some plot armor going on in this movie. Wait, I'm just realizing. Is there a car chase in this one? Or am I getting that mixed up with Megalon?
I think the car chase is in Godzilla vs. Megalon.
Okay.
Udi, can you confirm this?
By the car chase you mean like when the two people are in the back of the truck, right? Or no?
Well, I don't. There's like a motorcycle and a car going downstairs.
I think that might be Megalon. Like, I watched these two, like, back to back, so they kind of blended together, but plus it didn't help that they both had Gigan, so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listeners, if I got that mixed up, please just regard everything I said about the car chase. I guess at that point, if we have nothing else to add to Gigan, we could just switch over to Megalon.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready to switch over.
Yeah. So I guess it's now time for Godzilla versus Megalon. So let's get into it, I guess.
All right. So in Godzilla vs. Megalon, inventor Goro Ibuki creates a humanoid robot named Jet Jaguar, and it is soon seized by an undersea race of people called the Seatopians. Using Jet Jaguar as a guide, the Seatopians send Megalon as vengeance for the nuclear tests that have devastated their society.
You see, Udi, that was the wrong description you just read there. The right description is, now this was an actual description given for this movie at one point. Godzilla and Jet Jaguar meet Big Cockroach and Black Chicken. I am not kidding you. That's an actual description for this movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's accurate.
Yeah. I just thought I would share that.
Thank you for sharing this with us. Where was this description?
I don't know, because I'm looking at the screenshot right now. It looks like it's on Amazon or something. I have no idea. Because, yeah, it looks like it's on Amazon or like Roku or whatever, so.
Not Roku City.
But yeah, that's a real description for Godzilla vs. Megalon. I think the guy who wrote that just gave up. He was like, I don't know. But anyway, Godzilla vs. Megalon is a 1973 film directed by Jun Fukuda, written by Fukuda and Shinichi Sekizawa, and produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, with special effects by Teruyushi Nakano. This film is the 13th film in the Godzilla franchise. The kaiju featured in this film are Godzilla, Megalon, Gigan, and of course, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Jet freaking Jaguar. If you couldn't tell, I love Jet Jaguar. I love Jet Jaguar, man. He's the best. Has his own theme song and everything. But anyway, the film stars Katsuhiko Sasaki, Hiroyuki Kawase, Yutaka Hayashi, and Robert Dunn. I'm sorry, I was not
Robert Dunn.
Robert Dunham? I'm so sorry. I was not expecting that name in this sea of like Japanese names.
Like Blue Beetle.
You know, someone had to play the Seatopia character.
Yeah.
Guess it was him.
Okay. I'll say that again. So, all right. The film stars Katsuhiko Sasaki, Hiroyuki Kawase, Yutaka Hayashi, and Robert Dunham, alongside Shinji Takagi as Godzilla, Hideto Date as Megalon, Kenpachiro Satsuma as Gigan, and Sugotoshi Komada as Jet Jaguar. Legend.
Yeah, so what are your guys' initial thoughts on this movie? Dad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, really, what can I say about this one? It's goofy in like the best possible ways. I love Jet Jaguar. Megalon is one of the more uniquely designed monsters in the franchise. It's fun to get a slight change of pace and go from aliens to pretty much the equivalent of like evil Atlanteans. This is one of the first movies I think that really embraces the whole idea of Godzilla being a hero, which I've explained before I'm not that big of a fan of, but whenever I think of hero Godzilla, like this is the prime example because the characters in this movie go to Godzilla for help. Like he arrives not to destroy, but to help save the protagonists from like the terrors of Megalon and Gigan. I have Rodan written down for some reason. Why do I have Rodan? Rodan's not even in this movie.
He's there in spirit.
Yeah. So, but he's there to help save the protagonist from like the terrors of Megalon and Gigan. So it's really interesting because I think we've mentioned before, like they were really trying to target Godzilla to children. And what better way to do that than to pretty much make him a Japanese superhero instead of the scary, destructive monster that'll give you nightmares, you know? So I'm not going to say this is a good Godzilla movie because of how crazy and silly it is, but I can't deny that this can be a fun one at times, especially to riff on if you're with a group of people. What about you, Udi? What did you think of this movie?
Yeah. You put it very well, but this was definitely just more of like a silly, like a quick and easy, silly Showa era movie. It wasn't, in my mind, at least like particularly memorable, but it wasn't bad. It did introduce us to Jet Jaguar, which I've been looking forward to finding out what his deal is for a while now. So it's kind of cool. Plus, like I remember you had told me that he was a good guy, so I was like, all right, well, I'm intrigued to see how that works out because Godzilla traditionally isn't too keen on allies necessarily. Like he'll work with other kaiju, but he's not. He takes a bit of convincing usually by being beaten up, and then he'll join. So I was intrigued to see how that would happen, joining up with Jet Jaguar. But I thought it did kind of I did kind of get a little confused a few times, and I had to kind of go back and I'm like, okay, what's happening? Who? What? Where? Why? When? I feel like they're playing a little fast and loose with things, and But I mean, it's fine, you know. I don't really need to know that many details. I'm just kind of along for the ride anyway. But I did think that the whole like Atlantean species of people was unexpected. But yeah, I mean, it's part of the course for Godzilla movies at this point. Like we've had a few different kinds of aliens or other non-human humanoid beings. So I mean, it was just like, okay, what's your deal? All right, well, cool. And then yeah, but it was also kind of goofy. And then there were several fight scenes that I was like, this is so silly and so over the top. But you know, whatever. But yeah, it wasn't bad by any means, but I would say that it wasn't great either. Like as both of these kind of blended in together, not only because I watched them to like one after another, but they both have Gigan, and then they both have. Well, no, I guess not, but I don't know. Like they both kind of blended in together for me at times. Like there's some scenes where I'm like, oh yeah, like especially if the humans aren't in it, like I can't fully remember, but I do know, and this was the first time I was like, oh okay, I could tell that was true from that, and it's because it was so prevalent. But they reused the shot of Godzilla getting cut up by Gigan's saw belly in this movie, which I was like, huh, interesting. Is that a budgetary constraint or why? But yeah, I just thought it was funny because it's so prevalent in the other one, and then it's here again. I was like, oh, okay, all right, sure, why not? But yeah, that's how I was feeling about this one.
It most definitely was probably a budgetary constraint. That's the thing, is you can tell when the budget is low for these kaiju movies, because when they start heavily relying on stock footage, it's like, all right, like Toho definitely didn't give them as big of a budget as they probably wanted. So yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it was definitely a budget thing, and they definitely reused shots. They also reused King Hedorah's lasers for our lovely giant Christmas tree sea bug, Megalon. His star light up powers with his like electricity things. Yeah. Those are the same things that you'd use for King Ghidorah. And you can definitely tell when you watch them back to back, because I also did that. So these movies have blended together. They might as well just be one 3-hour long movie, because I don't know if I can tell them apart that much anymore.
No, that's easy. One has Jet Jaguar in it, the other one doesn't. So
Okay, fair point. But I don't really think Jet Jaguar kind of like adds anything to this movie.
that's fair. I mean, to be honest, he really doesn't. He just like flies around for a bit and then just out of nowhere like becomes a good guy, and like he like changes his size. Like he's kind of like Ultraman actually. Like he changes his size. He starts off small but then gets like really big so he can help Godzilla, and it's never explained. The only thing they say in the movie is like, "Oh, well he reprogrammed himself." It's like, okay, sure.
How?
Yeah, why not? Sure, just go with that.
Yeah, and he is similar to Ultraman. I was listening to a podcast that covered this movie, so I was getting some facts. I did not fact check this, but they were saying that that there was some kind of competition for children to design a monster or like a being, and that they like picked one that was kind of like Ultraman, so they could like ride off his popularity at the time. So that's probably why.
I think you're right. I think Jet Jaguar was like designed by children in a contest or something like that.
Mhm.
I think that's true. Once
Yeah.
again, we'd have to fact check, but that sounds right.
Yeah. So that's an interesting fact about this movie.
Yeah, that's cool. I will say, and obviously this predates this other movie and this design by a long time, but Jet Jaguar looks like Sam Raimi Green Goblin, but like with different colors, like a more kid friendly Sam Raimi Green Goblin, like Power Rangers ified Green Goblin.
Oh, you say that? Definitely, I see it. It's like the grin right? Is that the trigger of the connection?
Yeah, I feel like it's like the grin and then like the sharp point in the back of the head, like both of
Yeah.
those. Yeah.
I wonder if they took inspiration for this movie from this movie.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I have no idea why, but for some reason I could totally see Sam Raimi like watching Godzilla versus Megalon at least at one point during his life. So
Very possible.
Probably.
So I guess just to say my initial thoughts on this movie, it's weird. It has Aquaman vibes and Black Panther Wakanda Forever vibes in the broadest of sense. Mainly because of the Seatopia people. And like the fact that instead of weird aliens, we get weird, odd, interesting, although not expanded on as much as I would have thought they would have been, sea people. So that's a change of pace for this movie. So this movie is very simple and weird, but it moves really, really fast, like a television episode of some kind of like Power Rangers or like something of that nature. Like it's very fast paced. And yeah, I guess. Oh, and we have the famous tail kick slide thingy in this too. So yet another Godzilla meme to add to the list. But in general, pretty odd movie.
Couldn't believe when they finally did the tail slide out because I was like looking at the framing and like he looked like the one from like what I remember seeing in like the gifs of the tail slide, and I was like, is this the movie? And I remember like Dan said that it was coming up soon, so I was like, is this a tail slide movie? And then it happened. I was like, oh my god! And then it happens like twice in a row, and I was like, oh my god!
Like it's the thing. I know that thing.
I was doing the Leo DiCaprio like it's that thing. I was pointing at the screen.
Yeah, I did that the first time I watched it too. I was like, oh my gosh, it happened.
yep. The one thing that most people bring up when they talk about how silly the Showa era is, it's this movie. So, truly one of the more famous Godzilla sequences. Whether it's in the right way or the wrong way, I'll leave that for you to decide.
Yeah, that is something that we would have to decide. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty simple story. Jet Jaguar is a giant robot, and then we have Megalon, who is a giant Christmas tree sea bug. And instead of aliens, we get Seatopia. So like all together, this makes a really strange Godzilla movie. And do you guys think it's the strangest so far? Or did you think this was like an obvious next step compared to Godzilla versus Gigan?
If I'm being completely honest, I think Godzilla vs. Hedorah was weirder than this movie because while this movie does have like insane ideas like the Seatopians, like Jet Jaguar, like a robot that just has artificial intelligence and does what he wants and like can reprogram himself without any explanation whatsoever. Like the Seatopians, they fit right in with like any type of like evil antagonistic group in a Godzilla movie. Like they're no different from the cockroach aliens or the Zillions or any type of like evil alien that we've seen in the franchise before. Godzilla vs. Hedorah had like those weird sequences with the fish people and whatnot, and then the weird outrageous imagery during the dance club, and then like there was that weird moment where Godzilla just pulls two like spherical white objects out of Hedorah, and it's like what is going on here? Like Godzilla versus Megalon was definitely made for children. I mean, let's be honest, it's made for children. It kind of has it even kind of has like Saturday morning cartoon vibes now that I think about it. So yeah, it is a strange movie, but I I found Godzilla versus Hedorah to be weirder than this one personally.
There. That one was kind of weird and odd. So I definitely see where you're coming from on that end of things. I don't know, when I watched it, I was just like bewildered the whole time. I was like, this is so bizarre. So that's why I'm asking if you guys felt that way too, because I was not expecting anything in this film.
Yeah, I mean, again, just because like I don't really look up anything about these movies beforehand, I don't really generally go in with. I mean, pretty much my expectations are it'll probably be something like weird. It is kind of odd to me that in such like within just a few movies, there's been 2 kids being kidnapped, and it's like, is this like a was this like a common thing in Japan? I mean, like obviously, I mean it's unfortunately still a common thing now, but like I don't know, it it feels very prominent. I'm like, why? And then like when in the first scene where like the Seatopians like beat up the guys on the enter like the apartment or lab, whatever it is, or apartment lab, maybe it's both. Like the guys even beat up the kid, and it's like, what is going on? um, but yeah, like I go in expecting just like weird shenanigans and quirky group of people, and then eventually at the end you'll get like 20 minutes straight, maybe not that long, but like 20 minutes straight of like kaiju fighting, and then it'll end with Godzilla walking off into the sunset basically. So like this one was kind of basically that, you know, just like general overall same structure, but yeah, I mean there's definitely some weird stuff. It definitely feels period appropriate in terms of like its weirdness. Like, yes, this strange group of sea people are introduced with this group of scantily clad women doing some weird ritualistic dance for some reason because they're just weird sea people, alien thing beings, whatever. So like just interesting. And then like I feel like more so than the last movie, they almost kind of just shoehorned in like, oh, we got to have some sort of message. Well, what's the message? I don't know. Let's just do anti-pollution again, or you know, like not necessarily that, but it was like the I guess anti-nuclear testing and stuff. But like it was just so, and maybe because it was a movie so short, but it was just so like half-assed that it was like, okay, well, you know, they tried kind of, but didn't really matter. Um, I mean, outside of that, like, yeah, it's just just like a silly movie again. Like, I feel like they really, really rushed through a lot of things, which I mean, again, makes sense with the runtime, but yeah, I don't know. It definitely this one felt like a little off compared to some of the other ones, especially like again, like I really liked Hedorah, so coming off of like that and then having these other 2 kind of more sillier movies again, it's like okay, interesting. You know, I mean, again, I don't expect anything like Hedorah, so that was like a one in every one in like a sea of just silly, campy Godzilla movies. So makes sense. But just a quick question because I feel like this will also change our perception of the movie. Which version did you guys watch? Because I watched the English dub, which I don't prefer. I usually like watching just like the Japanese original and then with like English subs. But I didn't feel like watching it on Pluto TV. So nothing against Pluto TV. I like Pluto TV, but I just wanted to. I just figured I'd watch it on HBO, and HBO only had the English dub. So. Yeah, that's the one I watched, but what about you guys?
Well, when I first watched this movie, I watched my Criteria collection, so that was the Japanese one. And then when I went to do this rewatch, I started with HBO Max. And yeah, there was English. And I was like, oh, this is odd. And then my brain couldn't get over the fact that they were like the dub was in English. So I switched over to the Japanese on Pluto TV. But if I'm remembering correctly, in the Japanese version, the American Robert Dunham or whatever his name was, he's dubbed over in Japanese, but in the American version, everyone else is dubbed over English and he is not. If I'm remembering correctly.
That's interesting. So it's kind of like another Monster Zero situation where, like, because I think Nick Adams spoke English that entire movie and everyone else was dubbed over in English. But then for the Japanese version, everybody spoke Japanese, but then they dubbed over Nick Adams in Japanese. So that's interesting. But I also watched the English dub, like Udi, and because I just didn't feel like breaking out. Because I do have the Criterion collection, but I just didn't feel like breaking that out. I was like, I'm just gonna put it on HBO Max, and it was funny because I was looking at and HBO Max has English listed as original, and I was like, this movie was not originally in English, but I guess. Yeah, did Robert Dunham speak his lines originally in English then, Miranda? Is that what you were saying?
I think so. Let me double check that fact.
Is Robert Dunham playing the Seatopian guy?
I think so.
Because I know, like, early on, I was watching him, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't, like, his lips didn't match what he was saying. So I don't know what was going on there. Like, obviously, I mean, I wouldn't assume he would be speaking Japanese, maybe, but I don't think so. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I could be getting it mixed up with the other movie Dan mentioned. Let's see. I don't know. I should have looked up this fact and confirmed before I said it.
Well, either way, that's interesting. But in the meantime, though, I watched the English dub, and I don't recommend the English dub because whoever they got to voice the kid does one of the most, like, annoying voices ever. So watch this in Japanese. Don't watch the English dub.
Other than the annoying voice, was there any other differences?
I am not sure because, like, I think the English dub and the Japanese original are pretty, like, similar. Just obviously, like, they dub over the voices, but there's not any, like, major differences, like with the first couple of Showa era films, like the '54 film and King Kong versus Godzilla.
Okay, I found the fact. I was wrong. He was fluent in Japanese, apparently.
Oh,
So I was definitely getting it mixed up with the other movie.
that's kind of cool, though. He was fluent in Japanese, huh?
That's what this website says.
Interesting. I guess it makes sense, though, because, like I said, his lips were not matching the English that was coming out. So I was like, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for him to be speaking another language, but I mean, props to him. I really didn't expect for him to be speaking Japanese, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And I guess to your point really quick about, or your question about if, like, there was anything else different. I mean, I didn't watch the Japanese version, but I will say a lot of the sound design in the English dub was, I mean, I don't know what it sounded like in the original, but didn't seem very accurate, like, especially in the fight sequences when, like, or like anytime that they're like running around, like, you can just tell that the shoe sounds, like, hitting the pavement aren't right, and then just, like, people's, like, grunts, like it, I guess it gets the job done, but, like, it's just so, it just makes it even more silly and kind of funny because just, like, all these people like huh, 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 but it's like the action doesn't really like match what, like, you're hearing, so I don't know, it just makes it kind of funny. But yeah, outside of that, no, I didn't really, I mean, again, I didn't watch the Japanese, so I don't know, but
I might have to just give it a watch just for fun. But I feel like if the sound design is off, then that's just going to add to the strangeness I feel for this movie.
yeah, probably.
According to the Criterion Collection Showa era essay they have with their disc set, this film was the first Godzilla movie to be theatrically released in the West, to, like, America and stuff. And it gained a lot of popularity over the years, and was, like, the first movie that a lot of Americans saw. And if this was the first Godzilla movie you saw, would you have been hooked on this franchise, or would you have been like, nah, I'm not going into that franchise?
That's a very interesting question. So, yeah, you mentioned this was like the first Godzilla movie to be theatrically released in America. And it's funny because the US poster for this movie shows Godzilla and Megalon fighting on top of the Twin Towers. That does not happen. They never even go to New York in this
Huh?
movie. Yeah, look it up. It's Godzilla and
Why?
Megalon, and they're on top of the Twin Towers, and they're fighting each other. Yeah, I guess to market it to Americans, I guess put them in a familiar location. But yeah, they never even go to New York in this movie, so it's kind of false advertising there. But
I feel like that did not age correctly.
yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was the 70s, so but
That's true.
yeah, but yeah, so that's a neat little weird thing they did for the American release. And yeah, you know, I feel like, because once again, I've said this before, this was a movie made for kids. So I feel like if you're a kid and you watch this, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of children that watched this movie and it was their first Godzilla movie and it's what got them into the franchise. I would not be surprised at all. Heck, I watched this movie when I was a kid because back when VCRs were still a thing, that's what I would do, as I would take blank tapes and I would record the Godzilla movies as they would air on TV. And that's how I would watch them back in the day. And Godzilla vs. Megalon was one of the movies that I recorded. And to be honest, I didn't really think that much of it as a kid when I first watched it, because but I was already into the Godzilla franchise by that time. And even as a kid, and it's still something I want as an adult, like, I just want to see Godzilla destroy buildings. And Godzilla doesn't really destroy anything in this movie, so that's probably why I wasn't that into it. But yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question, because like, I feel like if I was a kid and this was the first Godzilla movie that I ever watched, I think I would still be a fan. But if I was an adult or even a teenager and I've never heard of Godzilla before and this was the first Godzilla movie that I watched, I don't know. I don't know if this would be the one to do it for me, if I'm being honest. But yeah, you know, you never know. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to say. I mean, like, as a kid, I probably would have been more inclined as like a kid than as like a teenager. Probably even as like an adult. I mean, I didn't mind this one as much just because like I'm used to watching these at this point. But like, if this had been one of the earlier ones, I probably wouldn't have cared for it much. I mean, again, like, it has has that going for it because like he's cool and he has like an interesting design. But outside of, well, that and like Jet Jaguar is cool. But yeah, as like a kid, I mean, I like Power Rangers, and Power Rangers has a few things going for it. Like, it has cool martial arts fighting, and then it has cool like vehicles or, you know, giant robot mech things, and then has like giant monsters and all that. So it's like not just the kaiju; it's like several kind of aspects that make it kind of cool for like a kid. So it's possible I might have watched this as a kid and enjoyed it and could have gotten me into it, but my taste has always been kind of strange anyway, even as a kid. So maybe not. It's hard for me to say in particular, but maybe just because, again, like, I did like Power Rangers, and you know, I didn't dislike big monster stuff. I just didn't like watch a ton of it necessarily outside of like Power Rangers and technically, I guess, I mean, not kaiju, but like Transformers, I guess technically, like big robots and whatever. But yeah, if I had watched this like as my first one as like a teenager, though, definitely would not have gotten me into Godzilla. Probably would have pushed me away. I've been like, oh, that's what these movies are like. Oh, okay. And then I probably wouldn't have watched anymore, at least not for a while or something. And then, like, as an adult, I mean, like, if we'd been hanging out in person, this is my first Godzilla movie, I probably would have been like, you know, it's silly, you know, it's whatever. And then just, you know, not really thought much of it, but wouldn't have hated it. Probably would have enjoyed it more than like when I was a teenager, but yeah. What about you, Miranda?
Similar to you guys, I wouldn't actually really know either. As a kid, yeah, there's a possibility that I would have liked it. But I kind of indirectly watched this one first, I guess. So there's this YouTuber, his channel name is Cold Crash Pictures. Crash Cold Pictures? I don't know. Anyways, he watched all of the Godzilla movies at the same time and like did a video on it. So like I kind of technically watched this one first, and that video intrigued me into getting into Godzilla. So like I guess for mine, be like it did hook me, but like indirectly. I think it's kind of neat that this was the first one that America saw, a lot of people saw, and gained popularity because of that. And I think that has a lot of influence on how America and Hollywood treat the Godzilla movies and their adaptations of the character. So if you look like at the MonsterVerse, it kind of has some of the same silly elements that this one has, Godzilla versus Megalon. So I think that definitely influenced how like the present day movies are being made, especially when you take like Godzilla -1, that's way more of like the original Godzilla, whereas like the Godzilla X Kong, A New Empire is way more like this one and Gigan and all of those like more silly type ones that have been made.
So, wait, I have a question then.
Okay.
Because there was like an English version of the original that we watched. Was that not released in theaters then?
No, the English one was, well, I don't know. Dan, do you know?
It was. King of the Monsters was released theatrically. That's why they got like Raymond Burr and like refilmed it, because they were planning on releasing it theatrically. I'm pretty sure. And King Kong versus Godzilla was also released theatrically in the US as well.
So the Criterion Collection lied to us, is what we're saying.
Well, I could be wrong actually,
but
it
lied.
Yeah,
I can get the essay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure King Kong versus Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters were both released theatrically, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were.
I mean, they could have been released theatrically, just not everywhere or to the same amount of popularity as this specific movie gained.
That's true. Like this might have been like the one that got its foothold or like got its foot in the door in America, and then allowed Godzilla to kind of be a bit more mainstream, maybe.
Hello, Editor Miranda here. I just wanted to issue a small correction and read the whole quote that I was referencing in the question. So the essay says, "This was the first film that many of the West saw theatrically. It was by far the most widely distributed in the United States of all the Godzilla movies of the 70s, earning it a special place in the hearts of many." So back to the episode.
So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but looking at Godzilla 1998, one of the issues with that movie is Paramount had a huge problem trying to find a director for that movie because nobody in Hollywood took Godzilla seriously. And if this was like the first movie, if Godzilla versus Megalon was like the first Godzilla movie to really have him break out over here in America, that honestly makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I didn't even really think about like, because if this is what made Godzilla popular in America, this is how America probably just perceives this franchise. And I didn't even really think about how that has also just influenced the MonsterVerse, because yeah, like maybe now this is just me spitballing here. I'm not saying that, and I've said this before, I'm not saying that America is not capable of making a serious Godzilla movie. They are. I mean, Godzilla 2014, that was a very serious Godzilla movie in terms of its tone. Granted, I mean, it wasn't a really great movie, but it still took itself seriously. But that's interesting to think about. I've never really made that connection before about like, yeah, man, like this is just how Western culture viewed Godzilla for like the longest time.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like it also makes sense, and I don't know if the average American would have known this, but it also kind of makes sense why it probably took a while for Godzilla to maybe be more accepted. Because I mean, not only did they kind of get away from having a bit more meaningful messages, obviously, like not including Hedorah, and like these two both kind of having. Well, I mean, this one like specifically has more like nuclear testing messaging, very lightly, but it's there. And the last one had just like anti-pollution, like an environmentalist message overall. But one aspect I'm assuming probably played a part in like Godzilla not fully being like getting the red carpet rolled out for him to the US is probably just because like the first one is the reason that these movies even exist are because it was like a conversation about World War II and the atomic bombs and all of that, and kind of like a piece of media to go through like the trauma of the Japanese and everything that happened with the bomb and the bombings and everything. So I mean, yeah, I'm assuming that's also probably a big part of reason. Oh my God, I can't talk. A big reason for why like Godzilla took so long to kind of start going in the US.
That definitely could be a factor too on how Godzilla gained popularity because of the subject of the original and just his creation in general. And this movie, although it does touch on like the nuclear things a tad bit, it's not as much as like the original or any of the other ones.
Again, like kind of how you always bring up, like it's just interesting to think about these movies like when they're releasing, like not only just like the subject matter of what they're talking about in tandem with like when they're coming out, but also kind of like the world that's at large and like when these movies are coming out and all that. So yeah, interesting. Did we have any other specific thoughts or scenes that we wanted to talk about from the movie that stood out?
The Jet Jaguar theme song is awesome. Jet Jaguar, Jet Jaguar, da 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 da.
I will say that he took a lot of beatings in this movie. Like I thought, I was like, oh man, can't wait to see him kick butt. And I mean, he did get kick some butt, but like he got his butt kicked a lot too.
That he did, but hey, he set Megalon up so Godzilla could do the tail sliding dropkick move. So he did help in that respect.
It's true. You're not wrong. I was like, oh, is he gonna grab his arms and then like instead of punching him, Godzilla's just gonna do a tail slide kick into him? Yeah. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He could also. I just remembered he could fly too. Like, what was up with that? He could fly. He just flies. Like, Jet Jaguar makes absolutely no sense. But you know what? That's what makes him awesome. So.
I did like that whenever he was flying, like you could just tell it was just like a solid figurine that they're like, all right, he's flying now. Woo!
Yeah.
It makes sense, but it's just funny.
They do like using like the characters' figurines, like for Jet Jaguar and like King Hedorah and Gigan too. They're just like, hey, there's our toy version of this creature. And does it look a little silly? Yes, but I think it adds charm to these movies. Because they want to do that nowadays. Speaking of the kaijus in this movie, let's talk about Megalon's design, I guess, since we've kind of talked about Jet Jaguar. Personally, I do not like Megalon's design. I think he is a giant sea bug cockroach Christmas tree, and I am not here for it. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but that's how I feel about him. very strange to me, and I do not like it. I don't like sea bugs, like lobsters and like horseshoe crabs. They like are I don't like them. So that I mean is a little bit influences my opinion on him just a tad bit.
I like that. I like the description you gave him, and I like that it ended with like Christmas tree. Because he does. I didn't really think about it, but he does have like a Christmas tree shape.
Yeah, he's got a giant star on his head. Like, that's pretty Christmas tree.
Deep
He's
sea
just
Christmas tree.
big bug with drill hands.
That'll do it.
Which, okay, this is kind of random, but like my first exposure to Megalon was in the Godzilla fighting game for the GameCube and Xbox, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. And in that game, he could burrow underground. Did Megalon burrow underground in this movie? I don't remember.
Truthfully, I have no idea. This movie kind of went into my brain and then went out of my brain, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember. And if he didn't, that's kind of funny then, because that's something they just added for the game, which is kind of funny. I mean, it makes sense. What else is he going to use those drill hands for? You know, so.
But yeah, I feel like, I mean, your description of him was funny and it's accurate for sure. Again, I feel like he kind of gave me a bit of a Power Rangers vibe. Not like an enemy for the Power Rangers, I guess, that they would fight, like in their Megazord. I mean, he definitely has like a Toho feel to him for sure, but yeah, I didn't hate him. I didn't think he looked bad. I thought he was interesting. Like his mouth is very interesting because it's almost like two layers of mouth because he has like fangs or something that kind of pop out, but then he also has like inner teeth, like his inner mouth. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like almost kind of like a different alternate version of kind of like a xenomorph, but not at all like that because doesn't jut out, but just kind of like a mouth within the mouth, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it was an interesting design, and I don't understand the stars, and him having drills for hands is an interesting choice. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it would have made sense if he'd been burrowing or like digging underground and then coming back up and then attacking from beneath. I also don't remember, unfortunately, if he did that or not. But yeah, I mean, it would make sense if he did. But yeah, he was interesting. Like, I don't know who my least favorite Godzilla antagonist has been so far, but I would say Megalon is probably lower on that list. He doesn't stand out a lot, but you know, I didn't dislike him or anything. It's just not the most memorable, at least in this movie.
That's fair. He, compared to all the other ones, is not one that would like automatically pop into my brain when you say Godzilla and the Kaiju. But he definitely is unique, which I guess gets him points.
You guess.
I mean, we could sit down and rank our favorite Godzilla Kaiju at some point, maybe. I'd be really interested in hearing both of your lists, though. Yeah, Mothra's going to be on top of my list, but maybe we'll save that idea for a different time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really thought about who my favorite and least favorite Godzilla kaiju are, so that would be kind of fun to do. I'd be down to do that.
I like lists, so I'd be down too. But yeah, if we don't have anything else to say about this little movie, I'll pass it to you, Miranda, for the lizard fact of the day.
Okay. Today's lizard fact of the day is the prehensile tailed skink, also known as the monkey-tailed skink. It is native to the Somalian islands. They live in tropical forests, usually inhabiting the upper canopy of the forest. They eat many different fruits, and they can reach a total length of 32 inches when fully grown. There we go. There's the lizard fact of the day. I guess it's time for ratings, so let's go with Godzilla vs. Gigan. Dan, what was your rating?
All right, so Godzilla versus Gigan. Like I said before, I feel like this is pretty below average, like Showa era film. It doesn't really do anything like that different from like other Showa era movies. I mean, I like Gigan. I think he's a great addition to the world of Godzilla kaiju, but I wasn't really super into this movie, so I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5 stars.
2.5. Okay, and Udi, what is your rating?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this isn't like a bad movie, and it's not a great movie. It's not the most memorable. It's fine. And I mean, again, like the big thing it has going for it, and I agree with Dan, is that it has Gigan. Like, he's just so cool. And again, like, I really do feel like a lot of the destruction scenes at the end look visually very, very good. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, so I'm gonna go with 2.5 as well.
Okay, a 2.5. I think I'm gonna give it a 2.5 as well. Because it's like okay. There's nothing too fancy about it, and it's pretty medium, but like slightly below medium. So I guess our Atomic Lizard's average score for Godzilla vs. Gigan is a 2.5 out of 5. Next up is Godzilla vs. Megalon. Dan, what is your score?
And yeah, much like how I felt about Godzilla versus Gigan, I truly don't think this is that great of a movie. It's fun to riff on, don't get me wrong. Like, if you get with a group of friends, maybe some drinks, and you watch this movie, it's a good time. But outside of that, there's just nothing. I mean, I love Jet Jaguar, and Jet Jaguar is great, but he's not enough to really save or salvage this movie for me. Gigan is in the movie, but Megalon, like you guys mentioned, is a pretty forgettable kaiju. I mean, he's interesting for the most part, but he's not really that cool, I feel. And the movie is just way too silly for its own good. And then, like, everybody always makes fun of like the tail sliding move. This is where Godzilla just got really too goofy for my liking. So I'm going to give this 2 out of 5 stars.
And Udi, what's your score?
Dan, stop copying me. Jeez.
Or maybe you should stop copying me, Udi.
I'm sorry. I'm not original. Yeah, I'm gonna give this a 2. It's fine. It's just, yeah, it is just kind of like, it's an hour 20, and it feels pretty quick, but it's just kind of boring at times, and it's weird that it can be a little boring because, like, again, it's so short, and it really does go by pretty quickly. Like, it kind of just goes and goes and goes. But it's just a bunch of nonsense, and then just kind of the cool stuff happens at the end, and then you get the silly stuff, you get the iconic tail slide, and it's like, all right, well, there he goes, walking off into the sunset as per usual. So, but yeah, I'll give it a 2 out of 5.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a 2.5 because it is blended in with Gigan, and I can't really tell them apart, so they're both getting 2.5s. Which means, with the math, that averages out to a 2.16, which would round down to a 2. So the Atomic Lizard's average score for Godzilla vs. Megalon is a 2 out of 5. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Godzilla vs. Gigan and Godzilla vs. Megalon. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes, and as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizards.